1 minute, sorry. نعم.
الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تمسك بسنته إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. So as we continue discussing the book Al-Mulakis al-Fiqhi by Ch4 where we mentioned that this particular book is to cover certain basic matters regarding ahkam al-fiqhiyya, so matters relating to the day-to-day life of the Muslim regarding acts of ibadat, and we have covered concerning the first volume that covers concerning the acts of ibadat such as as-salat and what relates to salat, as-zakat, siyam, hajj, and also jihad and the likes. Now we've been covering concerning the other aspect of matters concerning ahkam shar'iyya that relates to al-mu'amalat, so that relates to things regarding mu'amalat, the general affairs that the Muslim will be involved in regarding his day-to-day life. So of those things that he discussed first, or is covered first, regarding different form of business transactions, a different type of business transaction. So we've been going through those matters and covering regarding what are the guidelines regarding these transactions. So today, inshallah ta'ala, in this session that we'll be discussing concerning fi ahkam ihya al-mawat. So al-mawat is as we'll discuss concerning proper lands that is not in use, that someone putting those land into use. So we'll discuss concerning what are the ahkam that relates to this, what are the things that are allowed and not allowed regarding this act. Tafaddal.
بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. قال المؤلف حفظه الله, chapter 1, page number 183, Reclamation of Wastelands. Faqihs, may Allah have mercy on them, define a wasteland as a land which is not reserved for utilities or possessed by a legally protected owner. This definition excludes two kinds of lands. Number 1, private land. A land owned by a legally protected Muslim or disbeliever, whether he bought it, took it as a gift, or the like. Number 2, public land. A land reserved or specified for the benefit of private properties such as roads, yards, and watercourses, or reserved for the utility of the residents such as cemeteries, garbage dumps, areas reserved for performing the prayer of the 2 Eids, places of firewood and pastures. All such kinds of land cannot be legally possessed by means of reclamation.
Okay, so you mentioned regarding concerning what is being discussed here regarding that you might find that there's lands that either those lands, one that they are the property of someone that they owned by someone to be private property, and those lands that you mentioned regarding of those lands that are classed to be of private property, where one is not allowed concerning claiming of those lands, and then the person making use of that land. So of those lands that he made, so there's those lands that a person should not and cannot, where it is property already owned by someone. So property already owned by someone, that property that's already owned by someone, whether that property is being used or not, the fact that it is owned by that person, that it becomes private property, that should be respected, and a person need to receive their permission before he can do anything with that property, as it is the property of someone. Then I mentioned that also maybe public property, but they are not for, but one cannot per se claim of those lands. So I mentioned an example concerning turuq, so regarding concerning pathways, roads that are for the general benefit of the public, that you might include regarding concerning, like in our time you have like public parks. So public park is those can't be claimed by anyone because it is designated for a particular purpose. So you might have these public parks would be where one can we have this football pitches, but it's because it is designated for a particular purpose. A person that cannot go and just claim that land because it is designated for a specific purpose. So these are type of property, or so you have parks, play fields, or woodland that is somewhat meant for the people for people just to walk. So these are like so even though they are open areas, but they're already owned, in most cases, by the state or by someone. So those lands are not allowed for anyone to claim of those lands. No one can claim of those lands. Anyone?
The land which is not possessed by any legally protected owner is reclaimed by someone. It belongs to him due to the following hadith narrated by Jabir radiallahu anhu, in which the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, "If anyone brings a barren land into cultivation, then it belongs to him." Related by Imam Ahmad at-Tirmidhi, who deemed it a sahih, authentic hadith. There are other hadiths having the same meaning. Some of them are recorded in Sahih al-Bukhari, al-Bukhari's authentic book of hadith.
And then I mentioned regarding the second scenario regarding that a property that is not, let's say, owned by anyone. So the open property, not owned by anyone, that if someone wants to go and sustain claim of that property, but we have started to work that land, or if it is a jungle or bushed area, the person removing that bush, clearing of the property, and then start to farm it or to build a house, that nature, then that land is said to be of his property. Who says no, with it, that land of the outside, the exception regarding is not of something of private property or owned by someone. Anyone?
All faqirs agree that the wastelands can be possessed by those who reclaim them, except the wastelands of Al-Haram, the sanctuary of Mecca, and the areas of Arafat Mount, so as not to narrow the places specified for the pilgrims to perform the rituals of Hajj or occupy a place specified for all people. However, faqirs differ in determining the conditions required to make valid the reclamation of a barren or ownerless land.
ليس mentioned regarding concern Amatul Fuqaha, regarding concern the ulama, the Amatul Fuqaha, majority of the Fuqaha, that they all concern that a person can claim on used property. So a person that their property or land that is not being used, if and not owned by anyone, that it could be claimed by someone. But they mentioned that with exception also, that exception also extends regarding the Haram, or Arafat, regarding concerning those areas regarding that are designated for Hajj or part of Hajj, then it is not, no one cannot go under state must make claim of it, because it serves a particular purpose, which is a place to host the people who are performing Hajj. So those areas are already designated and not to be claimed. Then they mention regarding concerning, but with this also there are certain condition and guidelines. So a person who wishes to claim a land which is not being used, not being used, that it can be claimed, but also there are certain guidelines as to be mentioned. Anyone?
A wasteland can be legally possessed in some ways. First, when a person surrounds a wasteland with an invulnerable wall, it becomes his. For the Prophet ﷺ said, "If anyone surrounds a land, i.e. a wasteland with a wall, then it belongs to him."
As I mentioned, I need to regard of those cases, the person that the land is not being used and not owned by anyone. If a person wants to build a wall or a fence, then that now becomes that the person now staking claim to that property. The person now staking claim to that property by putting a fence. So he can take possession of this, and based upon the hadith of Prophet Islam that is mentioned here, where they mention that so the hadith here that is being mentioned, the hadith is the hadith of As-Samra that is being mentioned, the hadith of As-Samra that narrates on Al-Hasan al-Basri. So a discussion between ulama regarding a certain narration of Samra and Hasan al-Basri regarding those hadith, but I mentioned that of the ulama, even Jarud, that of those who hold the hadith to be sahih, but there's a discussion regarding concerning the narrations of Hasan al-Basri upon Samra, is that considered to be where he heard some hadith but did not heard some. So yes, the hadith of Aqiqah, that is well known that he heard this hadith, but as for other, then you have a lengthy discussion between the ulama regarding that matter. Anyone?
There is another hadith narrated on the authority of Samra carrying the same meaning, stating that when a person surrounds a barren or ownerless land with a wall, it becomes his, provided that such a wall is strong and impregnable enough. However, if a person just puts stones and earth around a wasteland, or surrounds it with a low fence or a small wall that does not prevent intruders, or digs a trench around it, the land still does not belong to him. Yet he is more entitled to reclaim it.
As we mentioned, a person might put a fence, but that fence is not considered to be suitable. as maybe too low, or that fence is somewhat where anyone can step over it or go through it. So that fence is not one which is a proper fencing, then but a person is putting maybe just some stone or a very low wall, then this may not be sufficient. It's not maybe sufficient, but it can somewhat start a process for a person to stake claim. So it might start a process for a person to make claim regarding that particular property. Aywa.
Moreover, it is impermissible for one to sell a wasteland unless one has fully reclaimed it.
So the person cannot sell it until the person is fully, and in today's time that can say, so the person cannot start to sell that property until it becomes his proper possession. Now, so it cannot be sold, it can be used, but not sold until everything is somewhat been cleared that he is now the owner of that property.
Second, if a person digs a well in a wasteland until he reaches water, then it belongs to him as he has reclaimed it.
So the second way of doing so is by a person now, at that time the person may build a well. Now, we can somewhat know, so because of this well being dug in that particular area, then we're used to water, per se, that land and that area, then it becomes something that he can use this as a reason to stake claim of that area. Aywa.
However, if one digs a well without getting any water, the wasteland does not belong to him, though he is still more entitled to reclaim it and own it since it has started its reclamation.
Okay, so I mentioned a second that the person, if the well is dug, but there's no water, so he doesn't have more claim, but he doesn't have full ownership or can make full claim of the property, but he has started the process, so he's more deserving compared to others. He's more deserving as he has started the process. Aywa.
Third, if a person supplies a wasteland with water from a well or river, he thus has reclaimed it, as providing water is more useful in the land than surrounding it with a wall.
Yes, so the person is, that's concerned another method of the person stating, indicating, showing that he wished to stake claim of that unused land by putting a system where water now is provided for that property. Aywa.
Fourth, if there is water that overflows into a wasteland and causes it to be infertile, one who prevents or drains such water is considered to be reclaiming the wasteland, and thus it becomes his. This is because this kind of reclamation is more useful to the land than surrounding it with a wall, which makes one owns it according to the aforementioned hadith.
Okay, so again, consider another case where the person is removing water from that property. So you have different ways in which the person can claim a property. The Shaykh gave some example of these. But so in today's time, they find that most property are lands that what is not owned by, personally owned, is owned by the state. So in most places now you find if the property, you have, if it is not personally owned by individuals, then the state will consider what is not owned by individuals, then consider to be a part of the state property. So you have to go through so today that the municipal, the government department regarding buying of any property, and they will give you the details regarding those matters. Anyone?
Some scholars maintain that there is no general rule to determine the cases in which a wasteland is deemed reclaimed, and that a Muslim must adhere to the common convention in this regard. What people conventionally consider to be reclamation of a wasteland entitles one who does it to possess the land. This is the opinion maintained by a group of the Hanbali scholars and others. The Sharia, Islamic law, states as a general rule that a wasteland is owned by whoever reclaims it without elaboration. So, a Muslim must refer to the common convention to find out what is deemed reclamation and what is not.
So Sheikh, you mentioned at that point regarding concern this matter regarding of claiming of this type of property today, and it goes back to the oath of the people. So go back to what has now become the customary practice of the people regarding when it is said, so it may vary from one place to another. So you might find that in the West, regarding they have their own rules regarding concerning what is considered to be unused land or wastelands, where a person can make claim of. Okay, might have an area that is a former like a desert, or area that is completely not used or not to have an owner. And not maybe in Antarctic, you may can't find that type of thing. But in most these countries, the government can somewhat, they own everything. They somewhat own everything. So, but the Shaykh mentioned, go back to the order of a person in the Muslim, even the Muslim country might be the same thing. So even the Muslim country may be very somewhat similar. that what is not owned by the individuals of the state that live within the nationals and is owned by the state, then the state will claim that property, and you have to go through that government department regarding this process. So a person said, no, because the Hadith said you can do so, I must do so, but there's still procedures in place. So there's still procedures in place where the person, generally, as I mentioned, that the Wali al-Amr, the head of the state, they have to give, they have a say in this matter. The state, they have a say on this matter. Aywa.
The Imam of the Muslims, the ruler or the one in authority, is permitted to grant the wasteland to whoever reclaims it. For the Prophet ﷺ granted the valley of Al-Aqiq in Medina to Bilal ibn Harith, and they landed in Hadramaut to Wa'il ibn Hujar.
Wa'il ibn Hujar. Wa'il. So the Prophet acting. So the Prophet ﷺ, regarding his role, it varies. Ahlan. So you find that at times, regarding concerning that the Prophet ﷺ, but also he was the head of state, who considered to be the person, the head of the state, who the leader of the Muslim during his time. So also he had that role as being the head of state. And as the head of state, then of his duties is that he could intervene on these matters and to issue land to others. So he have done so regarding concern of the names that are mentioned here from among the Sahaba who gave certain property based upon this rule. So it goes back to the Wali al-Amr regarding the system that he has in place. Aywa.
The Prophet ﷺ also granted fiefs to Omar ibn Khattab, Uthman ibn Affan, and a group of companions, may Allah be pleased with them all. Still, the one who is granted a wasteland as a fief does not own it until he reclaims it so as to become worthier than others to possess it. Oh, what is that? Faith. What's the translation?
What's the word they use?
As a F-I-E-F.
F?
F-I-E-F.
F-I-E-F. It's like a kind of land, isn't it?
It's a historical.
It's a historical type of
It's going like 5 dome.
As he took back the fief of the verb.
Fiefdom.
Fia.
Fifth. No.
Fiefdom.
Yeah, like a land. So old English.
Old English with Okay.
Aywa.
Thus, if the one granted the wasteland reclaims it, then it belongs to him. Yet, if he cannot, the Imam is permitted to retake the wasteland and grant it to someone else able to reclaim it. For Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu took back the fiefs from those who could not reclaim them.
Yes, that what was given as land was given to those people that they couldn't, and so that's what is being referred to, land that was given to individuals by the state, but then in the time of the Prophet Islam, but later on Omar took it back from some people because it was not being maybe used as it should.
So these people, they couldn't build a sufficient wall.
Yes, I mean, so what he said, they didn't fulfill certain criteria during his time.
They couldn't dig the wall.
Yeah, some could be some factor. One of the factors that they forfeited on. So maybe it's best that it be reclaimed back from them and give to someone who is more deserving. Anyone?
Likewise, if one takes possession of a game animal.
So it shows that maybe what the one leader, one of the head of state, yet during his time may give away certain land to people. Then after him, others who can undo this. If they see that the land was given initially by their predecessors, is not being done properly,
and full conditions.
And with the condition, then they can take it back. So that to my fan, sometimes in some places like in Africa, we can certainly my fan the locals, we call them chieftains, now that they may have possession to land for their community. Now, but they and the chieftains, they can maybe give land to others. Now, but they all have their own condition, and also with those things that they at some point they can take it back from you if they say if they see you forfeit certain conditions, or for whatever reason, reasons. So those things, traditions still exist in some communities. Anyone?
Likewise, if one takes possession of a game animal, firewood, or the like before others do, one becomes more entitled to possess it, provided that he gets it first. If a natural watercourse, such as that of a river or a valley, passes through people's land, it is permissible for those by whose lands the water passes first to irrigate their lands, withholding water from others until it gathers and its height becomes equal to that of one's ankles. Then they should allow it to flow to those next to them, and so on and so forth. The Prophet ﷺ said to Zubair on a similar occasion, O Zubair, irrigate your land and then withhold the water until it reaches the walls between the pits around the trees. Related by Bukhari and Muslim. Abdul Razak related that Ma'mar reported that Az-Zuhri said, when we consider the Prophet's words, then withhold the water until it reaches the walls between the pits around the trees, we found out that the height meant in the Hadith equaled that of one's 2 ankles. Thus, they measured the amount of water described in the Hadith and found out that it was as high as the ankles. Then they made this amount a measurement to determine the target amount of water, after which everyone should allow water to flow to his neighbors to irrigate from it successfully. Omar ibn Shuayb related that the Prophet Amr ibn Shuayb narrated that the Prophet ﷺ said about the torrents of Mahzur, a well-known valley in Medina, its water should be withheld until its height becomes equal to that of one's ankles. Then let the water descend from the higher land to the next, to which water passes first to the lower land. Related by Abu Dawood and other compilers of Hadith. If the water is owned by some landowners, it should be divided amongst its owners according to their properties, and each owner is permitted to do whatever he likes with his water share. The Imam of the Muslims, the ruler or the one of authority, has the right to protect the pasture reserved for grazing the cattle belonging to the Muslims' public treasury, such as the horses of jihad fighting in the cause of Allah and the camels of charity, as long as this does not narrow the public areas. Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu narrated that the Prophet ﷺ specified a place called An-Naqi as a protected area for grazing the horses of the Muslims. So
the thing that is that the person in charge also can have certain places that are set aside regarding certain animals, can use it freely. No?
So, as long as he does not narrow the Muslims' public places and it is needed, it is permissible for the Imam to protect the grass grown in a wasteland for the grazing of the camels of charity, the horses of the Muslim fighters, and the cattle of jizya, and the straying and wandering cattle.
Okay, so the thing that is allowed by the Imam that he can do, and even today you might find in certain countries regarding concern that even people have their private properties, but because of the city expansion and road development, there are times that the head of the government might ask so as to develop the general country, so a part of the general development of the country, that they may need a particular piece of property regarding building roads or to expand the city, so they can buy it from the owner for that purpose. So that's concerning, that's the end. So go to the next bab, or go to the next bab. Aywa.
بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. قال المؤلف حفظه الله, chapter 2, page number 189, title Job Wages, and in Arabic Ja'ala. According to the Sharia Islamic law, job wages refer to the wage given to someone for some help or work he does. In other words, they refer to the fixed amount of money given by someone to another for the latter's performance of a certain task, such as erecting a wall. The permissibility of job wages is demonstrated in the Quran. Allah Exalted be He states in the Quran that Joseph said, "And for he who produces it the reward of a camel's load, I am responsible for it." Surah Yusuf, ayat 72. The meaning of that, however, reports about the thief who has stolen the measure of the king who will get a camel's load as a job wage. Thus, the aforesaid Quranic verse implies the permissibility of giving wages.
It's like a person being rewarded by, for some type of job, so a person being rewarded, being paid or giving something for the task that they have done. Aywa.
Its permissibility is also stated in the Sunnah. Prophetic Tradition through the Hadith about the stunned person narrated on the authority of Abu Sa'id in the two Sahihs in the other books of Hadith. Abu Sa'id al-Khudri radiallahu anhu narrated, some of the Prophet's companions went on a journey until they reached some of the Arab tribes at night. They asked the latter to treat them as their guests, but they refused. The chief of that tribe was then bitten by a snake or stung by a scorpion, and they, his people, tried their best to cure him, but in vain. They went to the group of the companions and asked whether they had a treatment or not. One of them replied, "Yes, by Allah, I can recite a religious incantation for cure, i.e. ruqya. But as you have refused to accept us as your guest, I will not recite the religious incantation for you unless you fix for us some wages for it." They agreed to pay them a flock of sheep, so he, that companion, went with them and kept blowing and reciting Surah Al-Fatiha, the opening chapter of the Quran, over the stunned man, who became alright as if he was released from a chain, i.e. showing no signs of sickness. Thereupon they paid him.
That in this case considered that they were rewarded for ruqya. So a person being rewarded or getting something as a compensation for performing a ruqya. There you are.
Is that that you can get compensation for ruqya?
Yeah, you can get so there's evidence that a person can get compensation. As I said, at this case was used like a form of like cure for a person who was ill. No? So a form of a cure. So ruqya is like a cure for certain type of illness. So a person being compensated for this, and also he actually said things. So it shows the permissibility of a person getting compensating for a ruqya. And you understand in this case the people being the ruqya from Muslim to the Muslim. So the Muslim, the one doing the Fatiha, and the people that were being read upon that they were non-Muslim.
Thereupon they paid them, the companions, the wage they agreed to pay. After that day, the companions came to the Prophet ﷺ and narrated the whole story to him, upon which he ﷺ said, "You have done the right thing. Divided the wage among yourselves and assigned a share for me as well." If the person performs the work for which a certain wage is specified, then he deserves it, for the agreement is validated by the performance of the specified task. If a group of workers performs a task, the wage is to be equally divided among them, for they participated in performing the same job for which the specified wage is paid. However, works when no wage is stipulated does not deserve anything that is considered a task performed without the permission of the employer, and thus the worker does not deserve any wage or reward. However, if the wage is stipulated after he has started the worker deserves only the appropriate amount of the wage according to the work done after the stipulation of the wage. Giving wages to a worker is a permissible agreement. Therefore, both parties, the worker and the employer, are entitled to cancel it. If the worker cancels the agreement, he deserves no wage or reward, for he thus drops his own right. However, if the employer cancels the agreement after the work starts, the worker deserves an appropriate portion of the wage according to what he has already performed, for which compensation is due.
If the measure regarding concerning ajala, that after those things regards the aql jaiz meaning concerning that any party at any time can discontinue. So it doesn't require concerning both have to agree to discontinue. That if one party wishes to discontinue with the contract, then they have that right. It doesn't require both to agree upon it, or the agreement of both sides. Anyone?
Giving wages, ja'ala, is different from hiring people's services, ijara, in some aspects.
So there mentions a difference between both regarding ajala and also ijara. There's a slight difference between both. So a slight difference that is mentioned. So it's an example of the differences that are said between both.
Among them are the following. In job wages, it is not a prerequisite for the validity of the agreement to specify accurately the task for the worker to perform in return for the wage. Yet specifying the service is a condition for the validity of hiring ijara. It is not a condition for the validity of wages to specify a certain period for the task to be done in return for the wage, unlike hiring, whose validity stipulates that the period of work must be specified. It is permissible in job wages to stipulate both the task and the period during which the task is to be performed. For example, one can say, whoever sews this garment for me in one day deserves such and such as wages. In such a case, if the worker sews the garment in one day, he deserves a specified wage. Otherwise, he deserves nothing. However, in hiring, it is impermissible for the employer to stipulate both the service and the time during which he is to be done, i.e. the worker receives his wage once he performs his work. In case of job wages, one is not obliged to perform the task, but in hiring, the hired person is obliged to perform the service. It is not a condition for the validity of giving job wages to specify a certain person to perform the said task. However, in hiring, specifying the worker is a condition for its validity. Giving wages is a permissible agreement which each of the two parties can cancel without the permission of the other. Yet hiring a person's service is a binding agreement that neither of the parties can cancel unless the other agrees.
With regard to so the Sheikh Hafidullah basically wanted to mention that some slight difference between what they call ja'ala and also ijara. So slight difference between this person getting compensated, but regarding concerning that ijara, that it is more specific, the detail is more specific. As for ajala, much more fluent regarding the contract or the agreement between both. Anyone?
Faqirs maintain that whoever performs a task for another without stipulating a wage or taking the employer's permission deserves nothing as wages. This is because he thus performs a task without stipulating compensation, so he deserves nothing in compensation. And he cannot enjoin the employer to do something the latter is not obliged to do. However, there are two exceptions in this case. First, if a worker, such as a broker, a porter, or the like, has prepared himself to do a certain service for a certain reward or wage, and as a reward or wage, even if he has not permitted to do it, unless there has been a previous condition.
Anyone?
Second, if someone rescues another's property from damage or destruction, the former deserves an appropriate wage for his service, even if the owner has not given him permission to do it. This may happen in cases such as rescuing one's property from sinking in the sea, saving it from fire, or protecting it from imminent danger. Such a rescuer deserves an appropriate wage, as he is concerned about others' properties and keen on saving them from damage. Therefore, giving him a wage here urges him, as well as others, to maintain such a good deed, namely rescuing others' property from damage and destruction. Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, may Allah have mercy on him, said, whoever rescues another's property from destruction and returns it safe to the owner deserves an appropriate wage, even if there is no previous stipulation, according to the preponderant of the two opinions in this regard, as well as the opinion maintained by Imam Ahmed and other compilers of Hadith. Moreover, the great Imam Ibn al-Qayyim, may Allah have mercy on him, said, if a person does something in favor of someone's property without the owner's permission to endear himself to the owner of the property, or if he does it to protect the latter's property and preserve it from damage or loss, it is permissible for him, the rescuer, to ask for a compensatory wage for his service. This is the opinion maintained by Imam Ahmed on many occasions.
There you go. So it's concerning that the author, Hafidullah, discussed concerning of those things of mu'amalat and business transaction regarding, of those ones regarding ihya and mawat, regarding land that are not being used, or property not being used, then that the person that one can somewhat make claim to this property, and he can somewhat give the guidelines. Then also second, regarding of those type of work or person being compensating, is regarding the call ja'ala. So ja'ala, where a person sounds like a person like working as an handyman type of thing, so like an handy work, but a person with a fixed or regular job, where he gets a fixed wages and fixed task. With an handy man, much more loose regarding concerning the task that is given. So those are the things that is mentioned here regarding of those ahkam that are mentioned here. And inshallah we'll stop here and continue and we'll continue next week inshallah regarding the other mentioned regarding mu'amalat. وبالله تعالى توفيق وهذه السبيل والآخرة والحمد لله.